Okay.
We are live from the SchiitR in Newhall. We're back in Newhall, right, guys? Because the crew, Jason Stoddard and team, are fresh back from Texas, Austin, where we all joined them for the SchiitR, the Shit Emotivia Texas Audio Roundup. And that is part and parcel to this particular live stream. We got there's a couple of new product chat that we want to get into, but I wanted to kick it off with Jason. What were your kind of thoughts on the show? How'd it go? How were things?
I think the show was great. I mean, other than I messed up my ankle, so I was kind of, running around in pain during the show. But, now I'm fine. I'm hiking. Everything's good. But no, it was a great show. We pulled a whole bunch of people, like, kind of out of the Midwest. It wasn't just Texas. It was like a lot of people showed up. It seems like there's a lot of interest in a show that's not on either coast. So, hey, guys, if you want to do a show and you're one of the big guys, don't do that. Let us do it, because we'll set up something, and hopefully we'll keep doing this. Maybe in Texas, maybe multiple places. But I do think that people were very excited. It was a great time for us to actually introduce some new stuff, even though it was kind of at the last minute. Literally, like, I kind of woke up one day and went, "Wait, we have a show. We could do the Bifrost thing, and we could do the Lear thing." And if you guys are wondering why the intros were kind of different, and one's kind of available right away-ish, and the other's not so much, that's because, like, hey, we got a great chance to do this, and that's what we did.
Yeah, I was actually able to attend, and I had a great time. Do you have any, like, favorite moments from the show that you kind of picked up on? And
yeah, I really loved the moment when Dan looked at me and said, "You have a lot more gray hair." And I said, "You got a lot fatter."
Oh.
So, no, we play with each other. It's fine, And no, we hadn't seen each other since literally before COVID. So Dan is, founder of Emotiva, and I'm, founder of Shit. In case you guys happened on this, podcast or video thing late at night and are wondering what the heck you're watching. Well, you still don't know what you're watching. Who knows who Emotiva and Shit are? I don't. Anyway, no, that was a good moment. Just seeing people for the first time was really the main thing. This is the first show I've been to, since COVID. It was great seeing the Emotiva guys. It's great, ribbing them, because literally it's like, if the older crowd came in, I'm like, hey, Emotiva's down the hall. And if the younger crowd came in, Dan's like, get in the elevator, go upstairs, shit's upstairs. It's like, it's fine though. It's really weird because Emotiva sells, inexpensive stuff. There's no reason they couldn't, sell to our audience. And, maybe vice versa. We don't really do a lot of, we don't do any surround. But that's not all their market. But then again, I shouldn't be doing a commercial for Emotiva. But hey, I use their stuff in my home theater. I use their amps all the time. So I don't particularly want to have 7 tiers stacked up all that much, or 16 or 32 or however many channels there are these days, which is something I don't play with. I stopped at 7 and I'm done. So there we go.
Yeah, I thought the combination that you guys both offered, the idea in the face, like, to a contrast of the traditional audiophile high end, is that you both shoot for price points that are, like, obviously high value. I know everyone says that, but your two brands, they both deliver on that, I think, a little more than your average audiophile brand, which I felt like the crowd was united in that front when they came, and they were, from my experience, it was a good time. The vibes were really good.
Yeah.
The people had a great time. It was very, very laid back and fun. Not that regular audio shows aren't fun, but it just had kind of a different vibe, I think, than your traditional. Not that they're stuffy, but the clientele can be a little more uptight than, like, the relaxed guys or people getting into it. There's just like a real sense of excitement and freshness to the people that attended that show. So super fun. It was in Austin. Any plans to do another one?
I certainly hope so. But to hit the relaxed note, I mean, we were using homemade speakers. I mean, we have a guy who works, does a little bit of work with us. He basically does some of our visualizations of are we out of stock? Guys might notice we're a little bit more in stock, so you can thank him for that. But he's like, yeah, I made these big giant woofer speakers. I'm like, heck with it, bring them to show. We could have done Sulk, we could have done any number of speakers. Maybe we should have done Sulk, maybe we should have done Magnapan, who were there. But it was like, no, let's have some fun with it and see. It wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but it's like, this is okay. I gotta say this. Anyone who thinks you can make like a critical decision on your system based on hearing something at a show, are you serious? I mean, do you actually think that? I mean, do you actually think you can do that? Because I don't think you can do that. So we decided to have fun, and hopefully we'll give you some other opportunities to hear our stuff, more seriously, here at the SchiitR, at the various shit shows that we are going to be doing, and at regular shows as well. But yes, I'd love to do another. Talking to Denise about the particulars of it. I mean, we've had a lot of people say, hey, could you do it in Tennessee? I'm like, I like Tennessee, and that's near, Dan as well. Some people said, hey, can you do it in New Orleans? I'm like, I love New Orleans, but that could get real interesting for a show, but, it would be interesting too. Texas, we liked, maybe we work on the parking situation next time. But I do think we need a show for the middle of the country. We have coastal shows, and then we have Chicago, which is it's fine, but I think maybe we need another show that's just like you said. Let's just have some fun. Let's actually invite some people that are just getting started. We had some companies that were just getting started there. We had a gaming room. We had a bunch of stuff. Let's do some weird things rather than just the same old. High end. But I'm crazy, so.
Yeah, it was. Do you remember there was this very interesting? There was even a DIY speaker that was in one of the rooms, where it was like a snake-like, unfinished kind of a thing. I think it was a really cool speaker. Do you guys remember who that was from? That was a surprise to me.
Well, heck, we had a DIY unfinished speaker in our room, but yeah, we had another. There was another one. Yeah, there was a transmission line speaker. There's a. So it's kind of fun stuff. The common denominator is it's fairly inexpensive. A lot of direct sale, rather than through dealers. So it's stuff that you may not be able to go to a dealer and hear. And also, it's probably something that you might say whatever. There's a startup headphone company there, and both. Alex, who runs our shop, he's CTO, COO, Chief Operating Officer, and his son, who actually does some of our code now. They both bought pairs of these are 3D printed, brand new startup, company, and they said these are really cool, and I said, yeah, they sound really good. Unfortunately, I have about 800,000 headphones. Sorry. And so, but it's nice to support them, and it's nice to see what they can do. And I'm looking forward to see, what else they can do, especially once they move past the 3D printing into more volume production.
Well, I think with that, we're going to move on to two of the products that were on display that were recently launched at the show. Were the Lear Plus and the Bifrost 2/64.
Yes.
Before we go into all this, I want to actually wonder if I could tap your brain to see what exactly does the Bifrost 2/64 stand for. What does that mean, and what's going on with that DAC?
Well, Dave he called it the Bifrost 8812 or Bifrost BFM something or other.
Just a random board number there, but yeah.
They laugh at the stupid kid, which is me. I do the marketing stuff. my marketing brain came up with Bifrost 2/64 when we came up with this. In the old days, it's like, well, how much bit resolution does it have? How much, and there's always this big argument of like, well, the original Iggy is 20 bits per channel, but there's 2 DACs, so maybe it's like 21 bits, of actual resolution. Man, I really wish I thought of this 2/64 thing before, because I could have said that's an Iggy like OG/80, and instead of people going, wait, you only got 20 bits, it's like, no, it got 80. Holy moly, look at all those bits. It's amazing. And in fact, I think on our website we have a little homepage slide that says that's a whole lot of bits. It's silly because the actual resolution of the DAC is 17, 18-ish bits. And we're doing very well using 16-bit DACs, but getting this higher resolution because we're throwing a lot of them at it. Dave probably has more, you probably have more details than that. I know there's a lot of magic that goes into that, but it does seem like on the analyzer we're getting 17-ish bits of resolution, and it's real linear down to about 18-ish.
Right. I always think it's just kind of similar to the less is more over in Iggy, or it's similar. I don't know, kind of covered it technically.
Like I said, they laugh at my marketing stuff, but
no, it's okay.
But that's that's it. We're throwing a lot of bits in 16-bit DAC form at a problem of getting higher resolution, and I think the main thing, it's our best measuring. It's our best measuring multi-bit DAC to date, which it might be. It's the tallest kid in the short kid contest, but it does actually measure quite good for a multi-bit product.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What about the Lear Plus? We had a gentleman write in and say he listened to it at the Roundup, loved it. Any update on when it will drop? Take my money, please.
That's my product. That's what's going on my desk to replace my Lear. I'm happy. So yeah, I get it. We actually got first articles, and right now we have one of the first articles running here, meaning it was actually produced by the PC Board Assembly House that is actually making them. So this is one of the first ones they sent us and said, is this okay? And I was pleased to tell them, yes, it's okay. So, okay. Crystal balling it, because it's not like they necessarily just turn on the production right after we say yes. Crystal balling it, a couple 3 weeks, we'll probably be shipping. We might actually be able to beat our shipping date like we did with actually the Freya Noble. I said 4 to 6 weeks, and we were shipping in I think 2 or 3. So maybe we'll start a new trend of actually beating our shipping dates. Don't hold your breath. No, actually, don't hold your breath on that. But we're gonna try.
Also on display, I got a chance to hear this at the show myself. Someone wrote in and said, I couldn't get enough of the Folkvanger at the Texas Roundup. I was an amp hog. Is there any possibility of perhaps another run of something similar, perhaps less tubes? Wondering why you chose the number 10. Is that significant? Please explain.
Yes, we have 10 fingers. We use a decimal base. No, actually, it's just that 8 output tubes and 2 input tubes seem to work very well, for this particular configuration. As far as there being another run, I doubt that there would be anything similar to this. I know people have asked about, like, are there other limited run things coming, and it's like, well, if it's limited run, it's limited run, and this is actually so far a real limited run. If we were to do something based on this, it'd have to be based on availability of tubes. I don't think it would use the same tubes. It would not be the same product. If you're getting one of these, it will. This is. I'm like, I get it. I like Mjolnir. I could probably be convinced to do a tribute Mjolnir 1, solid state, maybe a real Class A product. Maybe in limited production next year. I don't know. That's something to talk about. I'd actually love to do it just so that people go, wait a minute, this is only 2 watts, single-ended Class A, and it's got these 2 giant heat sinks on it. It's like, yes, that's what you need to do, 2 watts single-ended. Oh, you want push-pull? We can do 8 watts. Still going to be enough to cook a cat on. There's a lot of stuff we could play with. I need to think about that one. That's something you could probably convince me to do, because I know there are a certain number of crazy people, including me, who would actually put one of those on my desk, despite the size and the heat. And maybe we do need some alternatives to tubes. Even though, one of our big things now is like, hey, you're safe with tubes with us. We have alternatives to tubes, and we have a good stock of tubes if you're buying a tube product.
And this isn't something that someone wrote in, but I did want to follow up with you about the Folkvanger. You've said some comments publicly about measurements, how it measured.
It's horrible.
And how it sounds. We've had a couple of people talk in the comments about this too. What are your thoughts on measurements versus sound, and how did that work its way into the design elements of the Folkvanger?
Well, I ignored it for the whole design of the Folkvanger until the end, and then I tried to make it better, and that made it worse. So I took it back to what it was. I think, this is not to say measurements don't have a place. I think Dave will be first to concur with me that it's good to measure your stuff as you're doing it,
Right.
and to see how it's doing. And we have actually improved the measurements of a lot of our products, but I don't think we're measuring anything near what we need to measure, because Folkvanger measures. Let's just face it, it's horrible. I mean, it is awful. Let's not mince words. This is the worst measuring product we have ever made. It sounds fantastic to me. It sounds fantastic to a lot of people. So do we just love distortion? I don't know. Possible.
No, but it's still just what it sounds like on the end.
I know.
No, it's nice that they measure low, but it doesn't correlate very often to how good it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to ask you guys such a crazy question, but is it possible in your minds that we just like to hear good distortion? Is it possible that real life, somehow the way we translate distortion?
No, well, some that measure badly also sound bad. And ones that measure great sound just awful.
That's what's weird is I can do an amp right now that measures horribly, let's say in terms of THD plus N, I could do a minus 40 dB THD plus N, which is like 1% distortion amp. That sounds awful. And that's easy. Just turn down the bias on any of our amps, and it will sound friggin' horrible. Whereas Folkvanger is 0.5 to 1 to 2% over a lot of its output, and it sounds fantastic. So I don't know. There's a case to be made. I know Mike says the real thing to look at is 60 to 70 dB. I look at a lot of, I don't know about that. I look at a lot of transient stuff. How does it behave transiently? And in fact, I've thrown out a bunch of recent designs that measure great, but the transient response is just absolutely horrible. It's slewing and ringing, and it's awful. But that's limited too. That doesn't correlate 100% either. I don't have like an audio quality score, and I don't know if anyone has, because if you did, what quality is that based on? Is it based on what you like? Is it based on what Dave likes? Is it based on what I like? Is it based on average? If it's average, you piss off everyone. If it's based on Dave, you piss off everyone but Dave. So I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I do believe we need to listen to it, and I do believe we need to measure it. Going for better measurements, there's nothing inherently evil or bad in that. It's just that if it sounds if it ends up sounding not great, if it's something you don't want to listen to, then that's where I would stop. And I've taken a lot of designs recently to, like, the point where I would stop. Had a choice very recently. It's like, well, you can continue down this current feedback low loop gain topology that we do for a lot of things. And I did, a bunch of prototypes of both. And after we listened to the voltage feedback stuff, I said, no, we are actually not going to do that. And we'll be introducing some new products shortly that are based on the current feedback stuff, and I'll talk about that in much more detail about the whys and wherefores of where we draw the line, because I think we're so far beyond where you can, it's say like minus 100, 110 dB. You're so far beyond where you would expect to hear it that it doesn't matter. I mean, you're talking about transducers that are minus 60. You're talking about rooms that you might have, at best, 40 to 60 dB of dynamic range. It's like, do you hear this? Mm-hmm. So I think a bigger conversation is needed rather than, here's a big number. And let's all select on the one number. It's like, that's fine. It's like 0 to 60. Sure, everyone would be driving dragsters. That's not real practical in daily life.
You talked a little bit about designing for a specific set of ears, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the stream, but the Harman Curve is brought up a bunch in a lot of different forms and all mm-hmm. this. And to my understanding, and I know it's a little bit more complex than this, that idea is based around the idea of averages, like the collective mm-hmm. average frequency response that everyone kind of likes if we group them all together in a certain way. When you design your amplifiers, do you consider the Harman Curve? Do you basically tune it for your ears? Or how do you kind of like address that whole thing?
Well, Dave will tell you everything we make is totally flat in the audio band, so there's no curve. There's no curve. But that's more like for headphones.
Yeah.
But I think the notion of averages and size of data points is really important, because the Harman Curve came about. I mean, Harman, okay, first, it's an internal curve. It is called the Harman Curve. This is by a company that makes headphones. So, it's kind of like, do you want to believe, all of, Pfizer's research when they tell you everything they do is safe? Just saying, it's by a company. It's based on very limited numbers. The number of people listening to these things is not large, and very limited research. I would say it's a very interesting result, and it should be tested. It should be tested with much larger number of people. Hopefully by independent researchers, and see what happens. That said, it's good to have, at least a starting reference point.
URD. URD.
URD.
We know you're not sure when it will be available, but can you give us a status update and where it is in development?
Does it work?
It was just the final testing software-wise, and I haven't seen any notes on it in a little bit myself.
I haven't seen any notes? Because Asa, our head of QC, said it works.
Okay.
So yeah, it worked. And in fact, we have one here right now. We should probably just leave it here, let people play with it, see if they find anything else with it. So the good news is development's done.
I have that is the number one question on every social platform right now, is about the transport. I hope you guys saw a lot of them, because it's if you fielded enough questions, more about that than I think anything ever.
Okay, do you want the bad news?
I love bad news. It's my favorite type.
The bad news is, we don't know when we can get the parts to make them. Right now we're figuring that out. It does look like we can get parts. Now it's just a scheduling thing. Also, don't be surprised if this comes out as more of a limited production product to start, so that we can actually get some data on how many people want this. We've had internal discussions about, should it be an ERD, all singing, all dancing, digital hub type product, or should it be a CD player? I'm not going to weigh in on that, but let's see what people think about it.
There's a really interesting question that just came in, although I feel like if you attend the channel enough, you know what the answer is. But Chris from New NYC asked, now that Moondrop and Hi-Fi Man are both doing R2R dongles, is there any chance that you might do a multi-bit dongle?
Not a chance.
Why?
Why do we do something just to copy someone else? Dave and I have had lots of discussions on this, and the discrete R2R. What do you think about that, Dave?
Or like I've said, just take a lot of, probably just have to, a lot of just measuring or calibrating whatever's built to get things to line up, because I've tried even just lining up the 16-bit DACs, which themselves are almost perfect, and one DAC chip to another, or even the DACs that have the ICs that have two DACs on the same chip, even aligning those two together is, I've tried again and again, and it doesn't work very well.
Yeah,
so discrete, you have every one of those bits has to be tweaked individually.
We've done a reasonable amount of research into doing alternate DAC topologies, because let's face it, it is difficult for us to get our R2R or multi-bit DACs in the quantities that we need. So believe me, I would love it if we could actually say, here's a discrete R2R, which is just a bunch of resistors and switches, and let's deploy it, because that eliminates that problem. The catch is that the accuracy that you're getting is, the accuracy you can buy in resistors is not what you need. The accuracy in switches that you can get is probably not what you need. You can do profiling, and there are some companies doing essentially profiling of each switch, and essentially compensating for that, etc., in some very expensive products. But production variability is a problem. Temperature is a problem, because it probably have to be in an oven to do it right.
Discrete one. The ICs, they have it all compensated for.
Yeah,
and they're almost perfect, literally. But
so we've been skeptical of this. Believe me, if it got to the point where it's that or nothing, we could probably deploy something. But I think what's more interesting, I think we can tease everyone a little bit in that Mike mentioned that we are working on our own 1-bit, which is not 1-bit. It's a multi-bit. It's a multi-bit but high rate, topology that I've been calling singularity. Don't throw up. I know. It's marketing. You can't get rid of the marketing sometimes. So anyway, we've been playing with that. That I think is probably more manageable, for the future if we're going to do our own thing. But right now, I think Dave's probably most thrilled with the performance of the 16-bit DACs we're getting, which is very good and very predictable.
I got a couple of somewhat interesting product suggestions. You can obviously do what you want with them. One person said, Paul Drake, would you ever consider adding a headphone output to the Freya Plus?
Freya Plus would fall over and die if we put a headphone jack on it. It doesn't have enough, juice to run that. Not even a high impedance headphone. So you'd be changing the product significantly. Freya S, that's an interesting question, because it'd be easy to get enough power out of a revised Freya S. I've thought about it. No decisions. Honestly, I'd love to put only a single-ended on the Freya S. You know, a quarter-inch TRS jack, and so everyone can go, wait a minute, you have balanced inputs, but it's like, yeah, and what are most headphones? Anyway, no great plans for the future. Too big a change on Freya Plus.
Richard asked, the new list R2D2 versus old square shoulder. Pretty funny guy.
Yeah.
Any difference in
He's
sound?
right. No.
Well, I like that. Richard, I'm gonna give you props for best comment ever.
Yeah.
I think I like that.
I would actually.
versus square shoulder.
I would love to etch them. You know, like
Like
R2.
an R2D2, yeah.
Oh, I'd love to. I don't think I'd like the lawsuit from Disney, but I'd love to do that. Well, there are minor differences in gain, but it's the same basic device. There are not significant differences in sound. And hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be selling those separately. So if you've been wondering about when you can buy those without a Freya attached to them, soon, very soon.
The new Bifrost has an NOS mode.
Yes.
Can you kind of just briefly talk about what the NOS mode is and how it affects the sound?
It turns off the digital filter entirely.
Right.
This wonderful digital filter that Mike and Dave and everyone spent years and years developing, that is actually truly unique. We decided to give you the capability to turn it off.
Right.
The reason we did that is that first we've been asked, how does it sound compared to other stuff?
Yeah.
And the other reason is other people, some people do use their own oversamplers. They do oversampling on their computer, then they run it to a DAC, and they wanted to compare that. And I asked Dave, kind of passingly a while back, it's like, how hard is it to turn off our filter? And he's like, it's not hard. Like, so can we turn it off? And that's how it came about. So now we have NOS mode. If you want to run NOS, that's great. And then you can start bugging Dave. If you want to run high rate, like DXD, if you want to run 384K, you can start bugging Dave about making it so that Unison will run at that rate. My evil plan.
Right.
Yeah, I have no idea what it would take to do that, but you're going to say, oh, it's a bigger processor or something. So anyway.
No, it just depends what product, but anyway.
And lots of testing to make sure that we don't have glitches.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
And
yeah.
something for Ivana to work on too for the code side.
Oh,
USB side.
If she's bored, she could totally do that.
Yeah.
That people have asked for that. I honestly, this might be a question for Brian. It's like I don't know how much, 352 and 384 content there is out there, but I keep getting asked these crazy questions about DXD and 352 and 384 now. I suspect most people are just doing the upsampling and then sending it to the DAC.
Depends on have to be looked at on each product though to bump it up.
Yeah, that.
Well, actually 384. Oh, but that's a pass-through. Well, yeah. Thinking about it more. Anyway.
Oh, my evil plan might work? Oh, this is
We'll
fantastic. This is fantastic. So, now everyone don't get too excited. It's not like there's an upcoming upgrade because Dave's just thinking.
No,
about
it
this
would
now.
probably end up being more than just a plug-in upgrade or something.
That's
But
what
we'll
I
see.
think.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Again, it's product by product.
Yeah, someone was bringing it back to our talk about distortions, beautiful distortions that sound good. I'm going to tack on another question that comes up kind of once in a while, but this person asked, Jason, have you ever played with VFETs or heard an amp with them? Any thoughts on that? And then I want to tack on another tech, the gallium nitrate. that have you heard that, and what do you think of that tech? Because that's it's becoming a little more popular in chargers now because of the speed.
Yeah,
and I know you've had that. Those are just two techs. What do you got on those two? Any thoughts?
Well, let's start with GAN because that's Class D, really. That's a Class D thing. I know Dave played around with that a bit, so I want his reaction.
Tried one peeling paint.
So you're not a fan?
I could tell from 50 feet away. I didn't want to go in that room.
You don't like the sound of it?
Just Class D in general.
Yeah. Okay.
To me, my ear.
Because you were doing some high rate, what? I don't know if it was GAN based, but you're doing some.
I did build one with the GAN little parts.
Yeah.
And it was switching around, I don't know, 2 megahertz, something like that.
It's pretty fast for D.
But still, commercial products and the one that I built, and I did similar reaction to both.
It's
And rooms at shows.
It's
Wait,
really.
so you've built a Class D GAN amp before? You have already prototyped one?
About 5 years ago, I built one. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
that was. I think that was back when Mike and I and Dave were all talking, and I opined that there's a lot of money to be made if we actually had a good sounding Class D. And so Dave worked on it a bit, and then we decided not to have a Class D. So I really wish we were deaf, because then we could make a lot more money by selling Class D products. But, and I am sorry if that offends someone. Yeah.
And just, I would say, most movie theaters are that way. And
Yeah.
they just have a sound quality that isn't what it was a long time ago.
And everything is a spectrum, because Class D, I think, if it's inside a loudspeaker and you know what the load is, and you can, that's what we were working on, is general purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
And those are a lot tougher. That's so. Who knows? Maybe someone else can do a fantastic one. We have not been able to, and so sick fets versus all that stuff. That's just religion. The real thing is that you can get great results out of any device. You can get great results out of bipolar transistors. You can get great results out of MOSFETs. You can get great results out of SiC FETs. You get great results out of vertical or laterals, or JFETs. If you have some power JFETs kicking around from the 1970s, you can get great results out of those as well. I think personally, what we need to look at is like, okay, what is the amp doing? What is the loop gain? What is the amount of feedback? Is there feedback? Because a non-feedback bipolar amp is going to sound a lot like a non-feedback silicon carbide FET amp, and it'll sound a lot like a MOSFET amp. Once you start actually going to complex high loop gain, multi-stage amps with tons of feedback, those are also going to sound similar to those types of amps as well. So that's what I've been playing around with is like, okay, how much feedback should we do? What topologies should we do? And I have been trending back towards the simpler stuff, which doesn't measure very well. Folkvanger doesn't measure well. If we do this Mjolnir 1 tribute, it'll measure better, but it won't measure all that well.
Just to ask you a quick follow-up there, is there something that you kind of have learned from this experience with Folkvanger where you're thinking, maybe the direction I'm going to go in the future has been influenced by this specific amp and your...
It has. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want every amp we make to be minus 40 dB THD plus N, but I'm less obsessive about the big giant numbers now because it doesn't matter as much. I was surprised. I was testing Lear Plus the other day, and that's a really interesting amp because depending on how you use it, it's got a fairly wide range. If you use it in solid state, low gain, that's like a minus 110 dB, THD plus N. That's a pretty scary, number for an amp that is actually a single stage, low feedback, low loop gain amp. It's very linear. Now you throw a tube in there, you put it in high gain, it's going to be more like 90, which is a fairly significant difference right there. And it actually measures much more like a tube amp, but is at a much lower overall distortion level. And with Lear, you can actually change tubes. You can hear the difference in tubes, or you can just go back to solid state and don't worry about tubes at all. And that's kind of the fun stuff. I like doing the weird stuff. No one did that because it's crazy. Why would you do that? Harder to get tubes, or they're more expensive, or whatever. And so it's like, hey, now we got this amp you don't have to worry about. We also have Freya, where you don't have to worry about tubes there. We got we have List. We have Freya N, where we got tubes until the end of time and space, apparently, for that one. So there are still options if you want to get into tubes.
Yeah, the new high wattage tier.
Mm-hmm.
The price point's a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
You got Vidar and you have SchiitR.
Mm-hmm.
What are the plans, or is there a path or any ideas around Vidar and SchiitR now that you have the top one? I'm assuming tier isn't supposed to be the replacement because it's probably double to triple the price, but any future plans? Someone asked for Vidar or SchiitR.
I'd love to have the standby button on Vidar. Beyond that, the amp's been really good, really solid, dead reliable, selling tons of them. So we'd be very careful about updating that one. SchiitR, I'd love to get some more power out of it, and with the tricks we learned from tier, we may be able to do that, but that's a different product. And haven't really started working on that yet. Tier is brand new, doing very well, and again, a nice solid amp. That's what I would have, and if I was insane, I would have 7 of those in a home theater, but I'm not crazy, so I have an Emotiva amp that runs nice and cool and has 7 channels all in one chassis. No plan.
I hope you're getting some commission off it.
No, and no plans to do that kind of product either. Let's leave that to Dan. Dan's doing very well at that. Plus, he gets to deal with the guys at Dolby and everything.
I was gonna say,
I just laugh when he's like, "Oh, Dolby" or whatever. I'm like, that's funny. So, yeah, I think Dave played around with those guys in the past. So,
from doing surround processors. Well, I let somebody else do that too, to a great degree. Well, especially HDMI, of course, which is like someone else deal with that changing and
yeah. Oh, we've had people ask, you got an HDMI input. I'm like,
no.
Oh no.
Mm-hmm. So William Ray asked this on both platforms, both Facebook and YouTube. He wants to know, why did you go with the TI DAC 8812 instead of the ADI AD5781 in the Yigi less is more? I believe this was before the ADI shortage.
Yes, it was.
I think just Mike was like, let's try it, and he liked the sound of it.
It seems like you like those parts. The 16-bit.
It sounded better. It sounded better. Or not.
No, it sounds good. I have my own preferences of exactly which parts or whatever, but still. But you're asking how it came about. Yeah, it was just Mike saying, let's try it, and he just liking how it was sounding, and they sound good. It's not, but just like anybody, just
the reality.
One person likes Fords, one guy likes Ferraris, whatever.
The reality these days may come down to what can we get.
Mm-hmm.
5781s, I have literally no timeline. So that's one reason Gungnir is going to go on hiatus when we sell out. 5791s we haven't tried because we still have some, but I suspect they're the same. A lot of AD parts are like that. So TI, we have a much better relationship with TI. It's a lot easier to get parts. So it may come down to that, but this was done long before the part shortage. This was,
well before.
Yeah, more or less is more, and even the early, You had a Bifrost 8812 real early. I know.
Around the similar time as trying to know
Yeah.
both, right? Mm-hmm.
So, but the thing is, they are really great parts. You know, I actually think the Bifrost 264 is an unambiguous upgrade from Bifrost. Sorry, Bifrost 2. So, you know, I may be crazy, but what I'd love to do is, you know, have Gunyer back, but that's going to take a lot of doing. And like I said, I don't know when those parts will show up. Even if we did, you know, a less is more style board for that, we're running into issues on DSPs right now. And so DSPs we're allocating to Bifrost and to Iggy, and everything else is on hold until we know more.
There was another question someone asked about review of the tier amps. Are any reviews coming of that amp? Someone asked, will YouTube creators get review samples soon? But I'm wondering if this guy is Ben, are you a YouTuber? Are you asking for one or not?
I hope so. I mean, I know that we're going to allocate some now. I mean, I know that there's some reviews coming, and I'm sure we'll get some others out. It's just been a matter of supply and demand, and right now we're into the second run, so we should be able to get some out to reviewers.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there was just some comments too. It's like people were so hungry for the idea of it.
I know
and they're like, "Oh, that's the natural step."
It's not a grand conspiracy. It's just that, you know, we had a lot of demand, and right now we're finally able to actually meet demand with a reasonable number of things now.
So Ben says he is not a creator. Okay, Ben, thanks.
Oh.
He was just curious, generally.
He just wants to see the YouTube creators struggle to get those out of the box.
I was gonna say, and if you drop one on your shin with those things on the side, they're like razor blades.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They're supposed to be rounded, and the definition of rounded, even though it's in the drawing, apparently is a little bit up for debate amongst some of our suppliers. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, rounded means what it says on the drawing, which is 1/8 inch radius, which is pretty big. But anyway, hopefully they will be less rounded in the future.
Someone said, send one to the audiophiliac guy. I think they're referring to Steve Gutenberg.
Just one?
Just one.
Yeah, we'll send him just one. then he can review it with one speaker. Perfect.
Is there a backup plan for DSPs if the supply doesn't come as expected?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just had this meeting a while back, but yeah. Dave and Ivana are working on, moving us to TI DSPs, which we have a good stock of. And I think Dave just said today there's some new DSPs from AD that are in stock that are actually, they're fine for Iggy, they're fine for like a Gunyer level product, maybe fine for Bifrost. It's not going to bring the cheap stuff back. We really need to get that shipment from Analog Devices, or we need the TIs to bring the really cheapy stuff back. But we're working on it, and we're trying really hard. The company that does most of our purchasing, warehousing, and kitting of parts says, you are by far the most motivated company to make sure that you can produce things, and we're trying. I mean, and this is amongst things like. You're gonna love this. Latest shortages for Freya resistors. I'm like, resistor. I mean, come on, really? So anyway, there's still stupid stuff.
Still hit and miss. Yes.
DSPs are one of those things where it's like you get them, or you have an alternate, or you're done. And we're working on it. We're working on it. I know.
Just trying to get parts for protos. It's usually 2 or 3 items. I got to spend an hour bouncing around the internet looking for where can I get those. I mean,
just for
to buy 5 or 10 of something. Yeah. Or the people who seem to be in Hong Kong or thereabouts who want 5 to Well, there's
100.
one product that, like a little cheap audio analyzer, I thought Ivano could use, but they said they haven't been able to make any since February. And they even put up there, I saw yesterday, they put up the 2 parts they're missing. And I went looking, and it's like a $4 part. But yes, there's people in Hong Kong, and they'll sell them to you for $200.
$200,
each.
yes.
Mm.
And in fact, we
Yeah.
did get hit by that, and the DSPs we were buying to use in Yggdrasil, which are normally a $7 or $8 product. I think we're paying $70, which you know, it can happen for Iggy. That's not going in a Modi multi-bit at $250. Just to be totally clear, we covered, and we got Bifrost covered with the less expensive parts, but beyond that, it's wait and see. They just AD just blew their November date. They you know, these parts went from like 16 to 30 to 50 to 70 to 90 weeks, and 90 weeks was November, and now they're like, it's May. So, yeah, that's why I'm like, okay, I guess we're doing TI.
Yeah, I was talking to another manufacturer at an audio show, and he said that he had a DAC that used a chip that was in the car. He also used in cars.
Yeah.
And that they became so expensive, and I asked him, well, what did you do? He's like, I took the big supply I already had, and I sold it, and I redid the entire design around another chip.
Yeah.
Right.
That is an option. Our stuff is not used in cars, unfortunately. But the good news is we've been paranoid, so we typically sit on a lot of supply. Yeah.
Just by a show of hands, guys, I'm actually really interested. We have a kind of a thing going here in the comments. Would you tell me, by show of hands, what reviewer you would most like to get the tier and like them? So I see here we have Steve Gutberg, the audiophiliac. I got Herb. I got John Darko. I got Zeos. Which one of these guys like the ones that are already commented, and throw in your other ones? I'd just love to know, generally speaking, the shit audio guys, what reviewer would you like to see most get the tier first? Anyways, but I just thought, I think it'd be interesting to see like which guys.
This is a poll.
A poll.
Yeah, this is
Like
a
the
poll.
audience. What?
Don't steer the poll. Yeah. Let's see.
Herb.
What
Another one for Herb. All right. Okay, we got the updates. Okay, this one's a bit. We haven't had a question like this before. For a product like a Tube Phono preamp or a Falk Vanger limited edition, is there any chance you'd consider crowdfunding, not for a product, but for as a straight investment and a percentage return based on profits or losses?
Not a chance. Yeah, no, I mean, just not a chance in that. Now, what I will say is that Lisa, who does our, she's our Google master, has said that based on the kind of searches we get, a tube and or higher end balanced / discrete phono preamp would be a great idea. Now, I'm not thrilled about that, but you know, it is something that we could look at. But you know what? We're a real company. We actually don't need other people's money, and that includes banks. That includes investment. That includes crowdfunding. So you know, sorry that we don't do that.
Jason, how much time do you spend in Texas? How are things going there? What's your bank account number? Oh wait, no, that's not it. Sorry. How difficult is it?
If you want to deposit, you know, not invest. Sure.
Is it difficult to split production between these two locations?
Right now we are spending 60-40 in Texas. Certainly 51-49 as far as California is concerned, but it's actually more like 60-40 in Texas. I like being in both places. You know, both places have their benefits and drawbacks. Production is actually going great in both because we were able to take the irritating part out of each one. We took the irritating part of the small units out of California, and Texas now does everything up to a lochias. Perfect. They do, 150,000, units a year, whatever it is. It's a lot. And then that leaves Valencia to play around and to fiddle, with the more complicated stuff, the painful things, the tears, the urds, the stuff like that. And it's actually made both of them better. Both of them have gotten a lot more efficient. Both of them are doing really well. But as far as starting up, your company in any state, there are advantages and disadvantages. Advantages in Texas, of course, are it's going to be lower taxes, easier to build something, et cetera, et cetera. California does have more infrastructure as far as being able to make things. So the vast majority of our chassis are still done here in California with metal from Texas, which is pretty hilarious when you think about it. But I like both. We have the coast in Texas because we're in Corpus Christi, and we have the mountains here, and I hike here in California, and I swim in Corpus. So everyone's happy. So it's been actually easy to do, other than the airlines have all been completely insane this summer. It's like we were stranded in Dallas, literally stranded. It's like once where they're like, looks like it might rain, so they canceled all the flights. I'm like, it was great. So it is what it is. But I do like being both places. I like being in both completely insane states. Take that as you will.
We got about two more questions here, and then we're going to bring in an external question here. So, there's been a lot of chatter on both channels about tube phono pre's. In a completely hypothetical situation, what price point do you think you could land with the tube phono pre?
I know Mike and Dave, I know you guys did one a while back.
I tried something many years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the tubes. The real problem with, if you're talking tubes, a tube phono pre is going to use specific tubes. You're not going to be rolling them.
Rolling it, yeah.
If we can get 6S3Ps, which I believe is what we were thinking about using, that's something it's well under $1,000. I mean, it's going to be probably in the $599 to $899 region. It really depends a lot on how gettable the tubes are. That's the problem. If we're doing a discrete, say a discrete balance one, oh dude, that's a $400 or $500 product all day long with every loading option known to mankind, probably Nexus and multi-parallel discrete JFET input and stuff like that. So we could, should we? Convince me. I'll be happy to do it. I'd be happy to make a product that everyone wants.
This has been trickled in a couple of different places, so I wanted to address it before we moved on. What are your plans for module-based DACs for headphone amps? Will 1-bit play a role in this?
Yeah, in that we're going to be using, we're either going to be using ESS as we are now, or AKM for the modules. Right now we don't have a viable multi-bit module. That's because actually we don't have the DSPs. Once we get the DSPs, I'd love to bring the module back, and that would be multi-bit. Our own 1-bit thing, too early right now to tell, because that's going to require an FPGA, and that's another wait to get parts. But I'd love to actually have more control over the actual DAC itself. The thing is that we do have products that take modules, so we can always throw something in there, and we'll always have something interesting.
We're going to bring on somebody who's here in person to ask a couple of questions. Dave, can we just trade?
Yes.
real
They're
quick?
kicking you out, man.
All right.
Well, we'll bring you back in, but we just wanted to.
Yeah.
Don't worry, everybody. Dave is coming back.
Yeah.
Go ahead and sit down and just tell us who you are, what you do.
So my name is Mike.
What questions do you have for?
With the folk Wagner
Mm-hmm.
and with the tubes that you chose for it, did you have like a certain tube that you wanted to go with, or was it just like whatever?
Oh, I certainly had a tube I wanted to go with. It was the tubes we have thousands and thousands of. I wanted to get rid of those, which makes it ironic that, of course, now it's hard to get tubes. No, I chose the 6N1P for the input because I'm familiar with it from the Valhalla, and I chose 6N6P for the same reason. Just used a lot of 6N6Ps because we have a lot of both tubes. It behooves us to make things with what we got. And so, yeah, no giant mystery there. They also do tend to sound good, and the 6N6P is one of the better tubes for doing like an OTL, output transformerless amp, because it does run a decent amount of current for a tube.
Good.
Huh? Where'd Dave go? You got any questions? Sure. All right.
Oh
Just
boy.
say this is a live stream. If you guys want to come to the actual event, you're more than welcome to swing by the SchiitR. If it's announced in
Yeah, I guess.
Facebook and
Yeah.
you also post to headphi.org, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah. We'll see if we can drag anyone down to Corpus at some point.
So go ahead and tell us your name and what's your question.
Yeah, so my name's Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So I read your blog post on the Lear 3 Plus and your kind of thought process and your design process for that. But I was kind of more curious about your design philosophy for the solid state section. Were you like trying to go for something equivalent to an Asgard, or were you?
Essentially with a solid state device. So I chose actually a different MOSFET than we use in List because it's embedded in the system, and also because it has a different operating point. So it's as close as we can. And it's funny, if you actually switch it over, if you actually go and switch from tube to solid state in Lear Plus, and you look at the DC operating point, it's almost exactly the same. And in fact, I'm like, oh, this thing is broken, it's not switching. The distortion measurements are totally different. It's clearly using tube versus solid state. But the DC points, very similar, and that's why we chose it. That said, it is not a tube. It's probably much more akin to a pentode than anything else. You'd have to wrap some weird local feedback around it to make it behave triode-ish. And I think I'd rather you hear the MOSFET for what it is, and then use a tube if you want. And that I will probably be using it with a tube most of the time, but I don't know. I mean, it's always great to have a backup plan.
You talk a lot about tube operating points. You've talked about the Falk-Wagner and Volley and Valhalla. Are the Lear Plus operating points similar to Lear 3? And then what drives your decision on operating points? I'm not really familiar with what they are.
It's similar to Lear 3. In fact, it's using the same, what we call coherence, in our buzzword bingo, our naming thing. We call it coherence, which is a tube and a bipolar transistor stuck together so that you don't have to use coupling caps and things like that. Operating points are important because it's like, how hard are you running the tube and how different is it from everything else? If you're running the tube really hard, and there are some products out there that do it, the life will be a lot shorter. We use a very conservative operating point on Lear 3 and Lear Plus, so that you can stick a good 6SN7 in there, and it's going to last a long time because it's just kind of sitting there. On Folkvanger, the output tubes are run pretty hard. You're going to get your 5,000 hours out of them, but they're probably going to be done, after that 5,000 hours. A Lear Plus, 15, 20, 25,000 hours, probably no big deal.
Do you have a 6SN7 that you like in your Lears?
Yeah, I do, but it's going to disappoint you because it's just the new production tongue saw. I think that's perfectly fine. That's what I use. Of course, try finding them. I do believe they're in stock, but they aren't $25 or $30 anymore. They're a lot more expensive these days, sadly.
Thank you.
Hmm?
That is going to wrap it up. Real quick, what wine are you drinking?
This is Tempted. It is by a local winery, and by local I mean it's local here to Newhall.
Oh, Newhall. Okay.
Believe it or not. By Pagter Brothers. It is a blend of Petit Syrah, Tempranillo, and Zinfandel. And
What do you give it out of 10? 10 being the best.
I always do it out of 5.
5? Okay. How many tipsy Jasons does it get?
But you also don't get like halves. You have to commit.
Oh man.
You have to commit.
Between 4 and 5, that's so hard.
Correct. No, that's not hard at all.
What do you got?
It's a 4.
It's a 4.
It's a 4.
Can I get a Texas recommendation that's a 5?
Absolutely.
Does it exist?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean. But does it exist? We're talking about Texas here.
The William Chris Estate Tannat is absolutely a 5. It is not a cheap Texas wine, but it's actually very good, and it's grown in hill country. And if you've ever been in Texas hill country and you're like, wow, this is hot. By the way, they're having their harvest like now. Okay, anyone who knows California wine, they're harvesting now, like August 10th, dude. Okay, so it's hot. It is crazy. And when they go, oh yeah, we grow this right out here, you're like, and then you taste it. It's like, wait a minute, okay. It depends on the grape. Tannats are good. If you really want to blow up your head, go to Slate Mill Wine Collective. They actually make I can't believe I'm saying this, a Cabernet Sauvignon that they grow there in hill country. No, it is not Lubbock. That they actually grow literally right outside the tasting room. And they I'm like, you really want to pour this for me, guys? I mean, you really, because I've had a lot of really good California. And they're like, no, this is great. And I'm like, see? It's actually, that's another 5. It's also not cheap. These are $50 to $65, Texas wines. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a real hard push in California. Because why would you spend that kind of money on a Texas wine in California?
Right.
But no, there's great wines everywhere. It just depends on what they do. I got Denise the other night when she was drinking a white wine. She's like, "Oh, this is great. This is fantastic." I'm like, "That's a William Chris white wine," and she's like, "Oh my God, there we go, Texas."
Have you ever had a great wine from Michigan?
Not yet, but I would not be surprised if they could do one. I've had a great white wine, at least, and I've had great white wines and Pinots from Long Island. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so...
Did it start with a Mad and end with a 2020?
No, I was not that drunk.
Mad Dog 2020.
No,
that joke. They don't make it anymore.
But no. And that's the thing. I think it's funny. I met a guy in Texas recently, and he just did not want to hear that Texas did good wine at all. And I'm like, no, it depends on. He's like, oh, I don't believe that at all. And this is like a Texan.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe this at all. I like the weird. I like the weird stuff. I want to find the strange stuff. I've had great grape wine in Japan. They actually grow
like a Concord grape.
No, it's a muscat variety they do, but they can actually do a great grape wine as well. So, you know, if you've gone to Japan and you've done the local wine tasting, it's like Texas, yeah. Next, we'll do Arizona, see how that is, because everyone's like, I hear that Arizona has one. I'm like, I'll try it, I don't care.
Someone asked, "Are you?" Final question: are you doing any tours at your Corpus Christi facility?
We aren't doing tours. There's not a lot to see, honestly. It's just people building things.
Well, I think you can check out. We did a live stream from there
Yeah, we
once
did.
with a little bit of a tour. You walked around a little bit. You can peruse the channel you're on right now, and I think there's a visual representation of that facility in there somewhere.
Yeah, maybe what we do is, I convince Denise or someone to, set up a thing where, we do a live stream, but we do it at, one of the breweries there or something. Or, we do something where people can come in and listen to a few things or whatever. It's either that or, we commit and we end up having a SchiitR in Texas at some point. That's tougher, especially in Corpus. That would be, I think, really good for Austin. And not okay. I know people from Corpus watch this all the time. This is not a diss on Corpus. This is just that Austin people are crazy like Californians, so they'd probably actually buy things. That's all.
All right. Well, Dave, any parting thoughts?
No, okay.
Dave's like, holy shit, I got a lot to do.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's how everyone in electronics feels like that right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Anything else, Jason?
No, I think that's it. It's like I did have a funny moment today where one of our guys said, I guess Apple isn't getting hit. They aren't getting hit by this, part shortage. I'm like, they're much better at hiding it, but trust me, they are.
Yeah.
My iPhone definitely knows there's a new one coming out because it stopped charging. So I guess it's time to buy a new one.
Mine's been using up the battery quicker these days. Yeah.
But that's just a conspiracy theory. That
I
doesn't
know.
Really
it's
happen.
also about 4 years old, so it could.
Well, definitely. It should be dead by now.
Right,
Come
right.
on. Anyway, we're just having fun. I mean, don't worry about any weird shit we've said.